Hello, everybody, and welcome to Heartlight Vedic Astrology. In today's talk, I was going to discuss Ashwini Nakshatra. Nakshatras are lunar mansions, if you're not familiar with them. You can kind of think of Ashwini Nakshatra as the pioneer star. And this talk is from a Vedic astrologer Jyotish perspective, so ancient Indian astrology is more than 5,000 years old. So let's take a look at Ashwini. Well, first let's take a look at what's a nakshatra. You may not be familiar. So another name for nakshatra is a lunar mansion. We usually refer to 27 nakshatras or 27 lunar mansions, but there's another one, sort of an extra one. So there's 28 in total. And nakshatras are based on the position of sidereal stars. Okay, so not tropical astronomy, but sidereal astronomy. And actually, nakshatras are considered to be the oldest part of Jyotish or Vedic astrology. And they were first mentioned in the Rig Veda, which is one of the oldest texts in Indian culture. So the thing is that what happens is the reason why it's called a lunar mansion is the moon passes through a different one every night or every day. And after 27 days, approximately, you get a lunar month. Okay. Now, the thing is that each of these lunar mansions has a different energy associated with them. And so, especially if you are into, interpreting birth charts, the Vedic astrology birth charts, so this will be important, at least helpful. Okay, so the meaning of Ashwini, I've seen a few different versions of this. One is a beautiful stallion, and the other is a horseman, like somebody who tends to horses, breeds, tames horses, keeps horses, that sort of thing. Okay. So the nakshatra number, this is considered to be the first nakshatra of the zodiac. Okay, because you can see the degrees for Ashwini are Aries, exactly at 0. So the very beginning of Aries, the first constellation of the zodiac, or Mesha in Sanskrit. And it goes to 13 degrees 20 minutes. Okay. So the Tara or star associated with Ashwini is actually a set of twin stars, Beta and Gamma Arietis. Okay. And that's important because we're going to be talking about twins quite a bit in this talk. So the symbol of Ashwini is a horse's head. Okay. So already you want to start thinking about like what would that like just as a symbol, as a generic symbol. If you've never heard anything else about Vedic astrology or anything, when you think of horse's head, what do you think of? Okay. So the deity associated with Ashwini Nakshatra are the Ashwini Kumaras. Okay. So these are heroic, golden armored, horse headed twins, okay, and they ride around on horses. They're considered to be the physicians to the celestial gods, okay. There's some divine qualities here, and they're golden, so they're sort of sparkling, and successful. Um, and there's twins, like the twin stars that's associated with this nakshatra, okay. Also, physicians to the celestial gods in the different sort of old texts and stories about them. Essentially, what keeps coming through is that they essentially perform different medical miracles. Okay. So their stories related to surgery, specifically blindness, beauty, enhancing like youth and vitality, also endurance and strength, and even things like that's not so like medical, quote unquote medical, but difficulties like bringing rain during times of drought. Okay. So the ruling planet or graha associated with Ashwini is Ketu. Okay, so that's also important as well. Because Ketu is the south node of the moon, and there's this kind of hidden, unexpected, quality to it. Also, Ketu is kind of like Mars. Mars is a very, initiative, kind of pioneering type planet. But Ketu has this kind of quirky bit of them. The other thing is that also Ketu can be kind of a separatist type planet. So, separatist from what? Well, separatist, I think, from the past is what I would think about. Because Mars, especially, and again, if Ketu's kind of sort of, it's linked with Mars, if Ketu's sort of like a more, unusual, erratic, even kind of energetic or aggressive form of Mars, Mars is all about initiation and pioneering. Okay, so that's part of why this is considered to be like a pioneering star, at least I consider it to be. Okay, so and again in other Shastra, so classical texts, specifically the Vara Hamihira in the Brihad Jataka, talks about specifically when the moon is in Ashwini. Okay, And again, if you do Vedic astrology, if you're into it, we talk a lot about the moon, because the moon, we tend to focus more on the moon and the rising sign or rising constellation more than the sun, which is typically done in Western astrology. Okay, so especially when the moon is on Ashwini, you might get somebody who has like a fine appearance, so frankly, just attractive to look at. Mannered. Okay, so there's some sort of like training involved here. Okay. Also fond of ornaments. So this is can be kind of funny. Sounds kind of funny, but fond of ornaments, like you might think of like a show pony or something like that. Like sometimes horses, like they're all dressed up and they're like even put in parades to do tricks and that sort of thing to kind of, I think they naturally get attention, but even more so when they go through these sorts of, exercises. And then the skilled, kind of like the Ashwini twins, right? I mean, they're physicians, but not just any physician. They're physicians to the gods. So these are going to be the best of the best, and there can be a bit of competition involved here as well, just like horse racing, right? And then intelligence as well, because again, it's not just the symbol of this, a star is not just a horse, but it's a horse's head. So especially there's an indication of like intelligence and that sort of thing with this nakshatra. Okay, so when we see placements, maybe the lugna or the rising sign is in Ashwini, or maybe planets are in Ashwini, then you might start to incorporate the indications or symbolisms of Ashwini. So you might generally see, again, some of the things I mentioned, like being first, pioneering, also potentially competition, like horse racing, that sort of thing, or different sorts of horse competitions. There are quite a few. But it's like an initiation, innovation type of energy. Okay, this is not old school. This is not languishing energy. This is not tried and true blue chip, type of energy. This is like, fast and, you know, uh, energetic typically. Okay. So, what other indications? Well, if we think about horses, especially in previous days, horses were associated with travel and transport, like hauling things around, maybe hauling humans around. But movement, speed, and maybe again, if you have like negative placements here, like maybe malefic, natural malefic planets, this might even be haste. So people who don't slow down, they're maybe so speedy they don't slow down enough, and then maybe they miss important details. Okay, then power and strength, and even like we get the idea of like horsepower, right, with machines and that sort of thing. Um, so there's this sort of forceful energy here. And again, the most of the stories related to the Ashwini Kumara twins is related to healing people. So this could be helping other people, rescuing people. So again, I don't think it has to be strictly medical. That same sort of like idea of making things better, in pretty important or significant ways. And again, there's just something about horses, right? They have a natural elegance to them with their mane, flying in the wind, as they're running by. There can be sort of charm. Usually people are drawn to horses, naturally. And then, but there can be an extravagance as well, again, depending on what's placed in Ashwini. And again, this might be the kind of show pony type of energy. Okay. So medically, Ashwini is related to the knees and the upper part of the feet. So, yeah, I mean, that's, especially with horses, I think about that sometimes. Is like they have such thin, especially the lower part of their legs is very thin, and it has to carry this like pretty massive body and head, So especially their lower legs, it's kind of funny that these skinny lower legs can hold up this huge animal. So I don't know. That might just, I think about that. And maybe that'll help you remember it. Um, so people in places associated with this Ashwini Nakshatra placement, people were courageous, like people potentially like involved in the army or athletes, who are very active, and um, like again, I keep thinking Mars, and again, you have to uh, be a little bit careful because the Ashwini Nakshatra falls entirely in the constellation of Aries, and Aries is ruled by Mars. So part of the Martian energy will be involved with this. But, again, there are almost three nakshatras in Aries. And so this Ashwini nakshatra in Aries is going to have a very different vibe from like the other two. The next one being Bharani, which is symbolized by a womb, which is, kind of related to cycles of life and death. Okay, so this is basically giving you more detail or refinement in terms of understanding placements in the constellation of Aries or Mesha. Okay. Medicine, healthcare, that sort of thing, helping people out. Again, it doesn't have to be strictly that, but a service, like public service type of positions. Also, all things equestrian, I would say. Metals and machine, again, these are kind of modern day horses, right? That they haul things around. They have this the way horses used to be used for hauling things around and carrying people around and hauling wagons around and that sort of thing. And then also this idea of transportation vehicles, which is again a modern day equivalent, I think, of horses. So okay, now these on this side we have more of the energetics of Ashwini Nakshatra. And let's see. So activity, it's considered to be more of a passive type of nakshatra, which may sound funny because I've just been talking about like horsepower and speed and all this sort of thing. But passive, when they talk about active versus passive, this is more like, especially if this is somebody's moon placement or lugna, which is a rising sign placement. People who are more passive tend to kind of go with the flow of life, as the people who are active who kind of like from hell or high water, they're going to head in a certain direction. Right? Like, anything that any kind of obstacles put in their way, they're just like, I'm going to climb over it or blast through it or whatever. Whereas other people like, well, maybe this is an indication, that I'm supposed to go in a different direction. Okay. So that's what we mean by passive here. As far as caste, and again, this is, again, related to mindset, not any type of hierarchy of society. This is considered like people who have it's a Vaishya caste here. This is related to people who think like merchants and farmers, marketplace and selling goods and that sort of thing, because the farmers are essentially entrepreneurs, right? I mean, um, and if they get beyond subsistence farming for themselves, then, they have to think about, well, like, how do I, sell these things and make a few bucks so I can plant new seeds next year. So cycle position. So what this means is there are different nakshatras related to, different phases of a cycle. So creation, maintenance, and dissolution. So Ashwini, as again, pioneering, starting, initiator energy is related to creation of things. Okay. Direction. This is related to, like especially different types of activities. I'm thinking of like muhurta, auspicious timing. So there's like up, down, and sideways, which is what Ashwini is, level or sideways. So these are energies related to potentially different sorts of activities, like especially like um, best activities to do during the time that placements are in, like Ashwini, for example. So direction nakshatras that are upward, like might want to do something like build a house or something. Nakshatras that are downward, you might want to set the foundation. You dig into the earth and set a foundation for a house. And then sideways, you might want to put like the floor, this the flat floor in there. So gender, this can be related to children. You have to be careful though, because you don't use Ashwini by itself. You have to consider all the other planets and the planets or placements in Ashwini. But Ashwini has more of a male type of energy. Then there's Nadi. This is related to Ayurveda, traditional Indian medicine, and Nadi specifically relates to pulse, especially if you do pulse diagnosis. So Ashwini has this energy of being Vata, which makes sense because Vata is a wind energy, so it's like light and fast and moving and churning and that sort of thing. So if you're doing medical astrology and you're finding some placement in Ashwini, that would bring a Vata type of energy, okay, to the reading or interpretation. As a general nature to the energetics of Ashwini, we've got a Lagu Chipra energy. So Lagu is light, Chipra is fast. So again, especially if you're doing muhurta or auspicious timing of things, maybe setting times for things. If you set an activity for in an Ashwini placement, that will give a light, fast energy. So especially if you want things to move, especially because this nakshatra is embedded in Aries, which is a Tara Agni um, constellation or movable fire sign. So movable fire is already moving and transformative and active, and then movable. So you have like this is like multiple fires or a fire that's really moving. Not just like some little candle flame. This is like things that are moving. And then on top of that, if you have uh, something in Ashwini, you're going to get a light, fast energy, like the horse is galloping, down the street type of energy. Um, and then the gunas here, this is loosely translated as qualities from Sanskrit. Ashwini has a tamasic type of energy, which again seems a little contradictory, but again, you have to integrate all this, when you're doing interpretation. But it has a tamasic energy actually, so which can be related to inertia. Okay. And so, yeah, so there can be, again, depending on what's there, maybe natural malefic planets or something. This may be like the um, opposite, of like light and fast energy. Like maybe if you have Saturn and Ashwini, that would be like maybe the opposite of like the light fast horse because Saturn is debilitated in Aries. Um, and if you had something like Mars, which might sound like a great thing, because you have Mars in its own constellation of Aries, so it's going to be strong, and then it's in like Ashwini. So you've got like Mars, like several layers of Mars, but that might be so much Martian energy that you get a whole flurry of activity without anything actually creatively establishing itself. It might all just crash and burn, because there's no real plan and there's no real endurance. Like maybe it'll start, but it won't complete itself, that sort of thing. So, gotta think about all these things together. And then I listed here also, I'm not going to get into it, the details here, but Ashwini is also used in terms of like matching horoscopes. And so, especially like sexual type, it's related to horse. And the species is devata or divine like being, and the tattvas are elements as earth. So again, if you do matching, this might be important for you to know about. Okay, so thanks so much for stopping by, listening to one of my talks. All of my teaching videos on the subject of Vedic astrology are my consults playlist. They can be found there. And if you'd like to learn astrology by looking at famous birth charts, I would check out my birth chart archive list 2025 video. Where you can find a list of all the famous charts of people, places, and moments of time that I've analyzed on the channel and the videos you can find them in. I do offer individual birth chart readings, and I also have some astrology classes. There's one coming up in January 2026. It's an intro level 1 course. So if you're interested in application, those are due, I think I said November 14th, so not too far along here within the next month or so. So if you want an application for the course or if you'd like an individual birth chart reading, you can email her, lightastro@yahoo.com for more info on that. And I do have another YouTube channel on natural medicine where I talk about Ayurveda, traditional Indian medicine, yoga, as well as homeopathy and naturopathic medicine. And the name of that channel is Nature Source Care, so that's out there too for you. All right, so as always, I hope you found this talk helpful, useful, and interesting to you as you learn to navigate the energy cycles of your own life. All right, so until the next one, take care. Have a nice day.